The Wuthering Waves community is in a dire situation as the result of serious structural and cultural issues. These issues negatively impact the game in terms of enjoyment, perception, and community growth. For the good of the scene, I wanted to talk about these issues in a more mature light. And so to do that, I brought someone more intelligent than I to have a discussion.
Hey, how's it going? My name is Life from Life Lessons Gaming. Rhinne reached out to me about this idea. I shared similar sentiments, so I'm looking forward to this conversation.
We'll talk about things like negativity, what our community needs to learn from the Genshin Impact community, and how to shape the community for the better going into the future. But first, I want to talk about character discussions and how they're handled in Wuthering Waves.
Yeah, so that's a really good one. I think what I would probably start this off with is like something about the characters. The characters in the game are really well made, really cool, from like combat design, kit design, so forth, so on. One of the things that, it hurts my heart a little bit, just a tad bit, is that I do feel like the discussions around the characters are a bit too surface level.
Mhm.
What do I mean by that? So you oftentimes this might seem a little bit harsh, but just hear me out. You'll oftentimes see these things where the characters feel like they're being reduced, I'd say, down to just really just kind of like memes and for the sake of staying PG, aesthetics. Um yeah, like you'll see these things like the Camellia brain rot memes
Right?
and Car Little Mon Tiny, right? Which are absolutely amazing. I love them. Phoebe Chubby, right? Like we love those memes, but it oftentimes feels like characters are kind of reduced down to those primarily, and we're not really discussing the depth of the characters
Mhm.
from their motivations, their
Right?
personalities, right? Those are not discussions that I'm seeing being had at a broad level, right? And as a result, I do think that that can be a bit harmful, toward the community. We have characters like Chang Li, characters like Augusta. I
Mhm.
remember even back in 2.6 when people were talking about the whole Murmurs Town incident, right?
Mhm.
And there was a lot of discussion about that, but very little of it was about how much they developed Augusta as a character, for example. So yeah, those are just some of the things that I've noticed where it's like the memes are cool, right? And the characters are awesome. They look really good. But it's like if that's all we're talking about, we're just keeping things very surface level and we're not really going much further than that. I think that that does hurt the community in the long term because you'll see is after the first week of a story patch or something like that, week and a half, there's not really much discussion being had after that because while the memes are great for engagement,
Mhm.
they're not the best for retention because it's very, like I said, it's very surface level. It doesn't really go that deep. So that's kind of one of the things that I've noticed around like the character Discord.
Yeah, I've noticed the same exact trend, but specifically regarding like meta stuff where people will
Mm,
say they say cool gameplay from Wuthering Waves. I love good gameplay from Wuthering Waves. There's things like
hmm
Tower Adversity, so much fun. Hologram, so much fun. Whimpering Wastes. We'll talk about that
Yeah.
another time. But Tower of Adversity, holograms, the overall core mechanics of the game are actually really fun to engage in. I love doing quick swap. I love figuring out how to kill the boss as fast as possible. That's enjoyable to me. Figuring out boss patterns, how to execute the comp in a way to like avoid getting hits, right? Or interrupted in the middle of my pattern. That's really enjoyable. But
Yeah.
I'll never see discussion around that. I'll never see discussion around like how a character will place in the meta, right? Like a good example was actually like Sonhua. I haven't heard any talk about how like Sonhua used to be like one of the like top tier characters in the game, right? But then
Yeah.
like as the game has started to shift away, right? Like a lot of her strengths aren't needed as much anymore, right? And Mortefi has kind of replaced her spot as like the premium 4-star unit, right? Mortefi is the best 4-star unit in the game right now, but I never hear anyone else bring that up, right? These are cool talks that I would love to have, that I would love to engage in, but I don't see them in the Wuthering Waves community. That doesn't mean that they're not being had. They're probably happening somewhere out there, maybe somewhere I can't see. Maybe it's happening in like the deep pits of Twitter or whatever, but I can't see it. It's not a prominent discussion, and because of that, it feels like I can't actually engage with the topic.
No, yeah, 100%. I totally understand that because, like, at the end of the day, yeah, they're definitely being had in these small pockets, but these discussions aren't really being kind of like boiling up to the surface of the community, and as a result, there's not like community-wide discussion and engagement around these topics. And like I said, yeah, I definitely feel like that becomes a bit of a downside in the long run, specifically for the games, just the games community
Hmm.
over here in the West particularly. So yeah, I definitely understand what you mean by that.
This actually kind of ties into the second point that I wanted to make. Recently, I've been playing a lot of Genshin Impact, and hear me out. Let me explain this. Let me explain this. I feel like the Genshin community does a really good job about promoting that type of content that specifically caters to people who actually play and enjoy the game. An
I
example
see.
of this is like theory crafters are super promoted. A great example is like Zajeff's a very prominent figure in the community. Whereas it feels like theory crafters and Wuthering Waves say like we used to have or people like Asian Invasions or like Thunda, right? These people don't get as much of a spotlight. I feel like in Genshin, I'll hear people talk about meta all the time. When I was playing earlier and trying to clear Abyss in 7 days on my old account, I was getting so much help from chat that I don't think I would have experienced in the same way in Wuthering Waves just because I feel like the discussions around the meta and like the understanding behind it just isn't there because those people who understand that aren't actually able or promoted enough to be able to spread that knowledge, right? There aren't meta
Yeah.
discussions happening. There aren't like this character is good or like this is who you should pull for. This is how you should play this team comp, right? I don't see that anywhere, which is really weird because I feel like I focus primarily on meta content.
Yeah, no, I totally understand where you're coming from. I mean, I could say the same thing for like the lore perspective, right?
Hmm.
Just for myself, I've noticed that, we don't really have the same degree of, I guess, community engagement around those type of topics.
Hmm.
So like an example would be like means lift, right? For Genshin. And I would probably say I'm probably one of the closer um versions of that for Wuthering Waves.
Hmm.
And so I had a video that I did recently. I remember back in the day with talking about community discussion, right? There was this video for Genshin, and this was a really big thing in the community with the whole the sky is a lie thing, right?
Right.
Everybody was talking about that. And what would that be, right, for Wuthering Waves? Have we even gotten a moment like that? I would wager maybe we have. I put out a video recently. It probably was the biggest video in Wuthering Waves lore. I'd wager I think it might be the biggest one that I've seen. That's specifically about the lore of Wuthering Waves, and it's basically where I kind of combine the discussion around the space lady we see at the beginning of the game, and how she kind of connects to everything in the game. And it did very well, mind you, which I appreciate the community for that. But just generally speaking, even with how well it did, it wasn't necessarily as big to the point where it was a vast community discussion. Even for how big that video did, it wasn't like something that was being talked about in the same way that like the sky is the lie was in the Genshin space. And even though yes, Genshin is a bigger game, it's not really about how big the game is. It's about the percentages. It's
Hmm.
about, are, 40% of the community, regardless of what size they are, or 50% of the community, are they discussing this in a way that it is spreading to the point where people who don't even pay that much attention to lore, for example, same with like I said, meta. The people who didn't, I would see some of the stuff that just the Jeff had, and I would be like, oh wow, this is interesting, and I'd check it out and be like, oh, that's pretty cool. So I might not have been originally like somebody who was engaged with that stuff, but because those were the people that the community was propping up, that's what I ended up experiencing, and then actually being able to grow an appreciation toward, in fact. And so yeah, like I totally understand that, where you're coming from with that. I've definitely seen that to be the case, this trend where in that space, like Genshin's not perfect, the
Right.
community's not perfect, but nobody's claiming that it is, I'm sure. Like all communities have a problem, but at the end of the day, this is definitely something that I think if the Wuthering Waves community could adopt, I think reasonable people could agree that if we could adopt some things like that, it would just be a net benefit. Regardless of what other game is doing it, it would be a net benefit for this community.
So, with the lack of that type of positive discussion inside of Wuthering Waves, how do you feel that actually impacts the community?
So I think this is where things might get a little bit on the heavy side. I think we have to acknowledge that Wuthering Waves has a bit of a reputation, and it's not really the best one. Um, and for a lot of people, perception equals reality. So I think I could best explain this with a personal anecdote about my experience when I first engaged with the Genshin community. I was the type of person who just, played games on my own. I never really like engaged with communities, online communities before. And my first time ever was Genshin. And, unfortunately, it was very negative. I was introduced, I came in there expecting to talk about how cool, it was when Ningguang dropped the Jade Chamber on Osile. I was expecting to see like, oh, let's talk about how wise Zhongli is and the bars that he was dropping. I end up getting faced with shipping wars, slurs based on who can and can't build a character properly. Whales should die, free to play should die. Like it was legitimately like I was like, wait, what? Like I had never experienced this before in my life. I was just like, I was so shocked. I thought people were going to talk about the game. And yeah, and so basically I was like, you know what? Well, I don't really care about any of this. So I'm just going to leave. Peace.
Smart.
And yeah, I was just like, yeah, like, this really isn't anything I care about. Like, wow. So I guess maybe this just isn't for me. Until I came in contact with lore content and .exes and things of that nature, MMDs, those type of dancing videos and stuff like that, and like comedy stuff. So like those were the things that kind of got me, kind of saved me in a sense to where I was like, actually, you know what? This isn't so bad. I'll give this a shot, and I ended up sticking around for that. And so in the same way, I think that the Wuthering Waves community is kind of dealing with a similar issue where I believe that the community is actually being filtered a bit. Because essentially that's what almost happened to me. I almost got filtered. And so I feel like the community is pushing away a lot of potential prospective community members. And you can say, well, how is the community doing that? Well, the reason why is because that the positive stuff isn't really boiling to the top, right? The those type of content isn't really like going up to be general discussions. The question you have to ask yourself is what is going up to the top? What is the type of discussion that people are seeing mainly? And unfortunately, it's not really that community building, nor is it positive. It's a lot of like comparison videos or, just kind of like a lot of negativity where it's like, oh, Genshin good, X game bad, and things of that nature. Even sometimes when it's just like, maybe somebody says something bad about the game and then you'll have people just trying to defend it, right? Which I'm not saying that's a bad thing, but the reality is those type of discussions are being engaged with more so than discussions about how great the game is. There's this saying of like you want to let people know you for what you're for, not just for what you're against. And I feel like within the community, there's these two, it's kind of like a double-edged sword because when that's all that is seen, when that's the stuff that goes to the top, that's all people see. And if that's all people see, you're going to one attract more people who want that sort of content. So as a result, you're just going to have a giant hive mind of people who are only well, hive mind's not probably not the right word, but you're just going to have a giant conglomerate of people who are constantly engaging with and consuming comparisons and negative content,
Mhm.
as opposed to the opposite, or not even so much the opposite, but as opposed to because there's a time and a place for certain things like that, but as opposed to things that are actually just focused on the game. But since that's not being shown, you're also pushing away people who don't really care about that type of content. And so I think for me, what I would say is like it would be better if we had more of a diversity of content that was being promoted and encouraged. Because I'm not saying that there's never a time to have, more critical discussion, but it's just like if that's the main thing that everybody sees, it can become a bit harmful to the community in the long run. And like I said, I just don't see that diversity in discussion, and it also just kind of homogenizes what we see.
To piggyback off what you said, actually, I feel like the energy we have for Wuthering Waves is being used too much in like a negative kind of destructive direction. We all claim that we love Wuthering Waves, right? We all want to see more of the game. We all cherish it. We love things that we talked about, like meta, the character designs, stuff like their personalities, right? The story, 2.7, absolutely amazing. But then
Yeah.
I feel like the energy we have for the game isn't used to prop those things up when it easily could be. If we all like the game, how come we aren't seeing more of like the character discussions propped up? How come we aren't seeing more of the actual, say, like gameplay propped up, right? How come I don't see like discussions about meta once again to bring that up again, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I feel like the community as a whole does like the game, but I feel
Mhm.
like when we actually take our actions with how we act about the game and how we utilize the game, we don't act as if we cherish the game as much as we say we do, which I'm not doubting that we do. I think that we do, but I think we should use that energy more in a positive direction to promote that more positive content, right? To help build up, say, gameplay or lore discussions or character discussions. All of these things would be so great for Wuthering Waves in the future. It'd be a great way to cherish the game. And I think if we get the community in a direction to start embracing that more, we're going to see a lot more positive discussions about all the great things in Wuthering Waves.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, like I say, make what you are for louder than what you're against.
Mm-hmm.
So with that being said, I guess I'm kind of curious on your perspective. What do you think this community behavior that we're kind of seeing, how do you think that affects the community? What do you think that entails about the community?
I think that we'll see a lot of eyes around the game as a whole, right? Like we see like
Mm,
character trails for Cartethia. That one got something like 2 million views, like pretty big numbers. But because the community is more fragmented, they aren't supporting like that more positive content. We don't see those
yeah.
2 million viewers translate anywhere inside of the Wuthering Waves content creation sphere. Like it feels like the Wuthering Waves community is more like individual content creators and their communities rather than a
Yeah.
centralized whole community that would like bounce from, say, one genre to another, right? If I go into comment sections for different creators, for example, you're going to see completely different people. I've actually done this before. I've looked at the people who comment on my videos and I've compared it to other content creators, even like yours. And we both make creative content and there's still completely different audiences. There's not even the same people commenting. I think Wuthering Waves right now suffers from the fact that there isn't a centralized community to actually bring people together to celebrate the game more. And I think that's a result of so much negativity in the space causing people to check out. I'm curious though, do you think there's like historical factors at play there that kind of exacerbate that?
Yeah. So the beginning of Wuthering Waves was not the best launch. I think we all know that, those of us who were there.
Mhm.
But I think what was more harmful than the bugs and the mistranslations on, let's just be honest, Jian's weapon was the kind of overall community discussion surrounding the game. There was honestly just a lot of negativity. And obviously, like there are certain issues that needed to be discussed. Those are important, 100%. But it's like we all kept playing the game for a reason. We play like if you started the game and you're still playing the game since day one, clearly there was something about it that made you enjoy it. And we didn't really see those discussions as much in the early days. We just saw the negative stuff. And as a result, that kind of pushed people away at the beginning. Like, honestly, that was probably one of the bigger problems because of the fact so many people, prospective players, like, and I'll just be honest, like, a lot of stuff we saw at the beginning was a lot of comparison stuff. like, oh, this game is so much better than Genshin and so forth and so on. And it's just like me, I play both games.
Hmm.
Like I
Same.
enjoy both games. Obviously there's certain things I like more in one game than the other, but that's normal. But yeah, like I appreciate them both. And it's just like a lot of people were kind of pushed away. A lot of people were just like, oh, these people are very hostile to people who like other games, like who might like Wuthering Waves, but also like Genshin. And so as a result, I think a lot of that player base was kind of pushed out. And we kind of just gave ourselves a not so great um reputation as a result. And then even beyond that, when you look at just honestly, if I can, I want to touch on like a little bit of the imbalances that we see between the Western community and the Eastern community.
Okay.
Because in the East, like they have what we talked about toward the beginning of this conversation, they have a very big variety of content that gets shared and promoted and perpetuated. Like, there's this thing where a lot of people say like they just gave up on the Western space altogether.
Hmm.
And they're just like, I either don't watch Wuthering Waves content or I only watch Eastern creators because they're actually creative. And the reality is it's not true.
Right.
It's really not. There are creative people in the West. There are people making creative, positive content. People from creators like Jadali is making some really good content
Sydney
in the
Mar.
West. Sidney Marr, he's making some good stuff. Obviously, I'd say us if we can. Uh, shoot, Thunder. Even like some smaller creators like a Powberry,
Right.
things of that nature. Like there's some really good creators in the West. The problem is a lot of people just don't know that they exist, unfortunately. And that kind of goes back into your last statement where you're just saying like we're the community has put so much energy into I'd say like they put so much energy into their defense stats that they didn't have any energy left over for their supportive stats. You're constantly just trying to defend the game. And I understand there is room for that. But it's like
Hmm.
if all you're doing is defending the game, but you're not actually supporting and building up the creators within the game that are trying to make this positive content,
Hmm.
I think even you mentioned like Eeks from
Right.
Genshin has kind of come through and he's made some content for the game as well. And so it's just like we're not really seeing that as much. And I want to say this is something that maybe some of y'all might not know, but it kind of comes down to the way that YouTube works.
Hmm.
YouTube is going to promote what is being made more of. If
Right.
you understand how YouTube works, like there's a recommendation feed for a reason. It's going to recommend you things that other people are watching in your space. And so if everybody is constantly engaging with negative content, whether it's because they just like that negative content or it's because they want to defend the game from negative content,
Hmm.
what's actually happening is YouTube is getting a signal and it's seeing, oh, this is all people seem to engage with. Because at the end of the day, YouTube, like their whole goal is to make money.
Right.
And the way they make money is for people to watch videos. And so if these type of videos are the ones that are getting engaged with the most, that's what YouTube is going to promote. So when people say, "Oh, I never see positive Wuthering Waves content from the West," it's because YouTube can't even recommend the positive content like that because people aren't watching it.
In a way, you kind of have to be the change you want to see in the world. If it sounds kind of weird, but if you promote that positive content, you go watch those positive content creators, you help the algorithm know that those things are stuff that Wuthering Waves specific viewers actually want to see inside of YouTube, right? If you
Mhm.
don't do that, if you promote the, say, or if you promote more negative content or more critical content, there's technically nothing wrong with that. Just know the effect that has on the Wuthering Waves community is that now YouTube
Exactly.
is getting a signal that this is what it needs to promote in the Wuwa community for it to generate views from Wuthering Waves viewers.
100%. And I think that's a very key thing. Like, we're not saying that, oh, just stop watching whoever you currently watch. What we're saying is that understand what only doing that one thing accomplishes.
Hmm.
When that's the signal and so when you see like, oh, how come I never see this? And like I said, when other people look at the space and they look at how we're perceived, right, as opposed to our Eastern counterparts,
Hmm.
we're kind of losing the race, I guess you could say, in terms of content diversity. Even though the content is being made, it's just like I said, it's just not being supported. And so at the end of the day, I think if anything, what we could get people to, or what we would like for the Wuthering Waves to do for itself, I would say, is to, like you said, be the change that you want to see in the space. Support the type of content. Like I see people say it all the time. Like, oh yeah, like I wish there was more this, or I wish there was less of this, or what have you. And it's like you you have a lot of power. Like you as individuals have a lot more power than you realize. You can make significant change if you so choose to. Both of us, we just want to see the community thrive because when these newer games come out, for example, best believe, those, like we said, the fragmentation of the community, it could potentially even get worse.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? And so one of the ways that you keep people talking and you keep people engaging, because at the end, like, yeah, people will play the game on their own, sure, but there's a real joy, and you end up getting like really like gems. You know what I'm saying? You'll get
Mm-hmm.
like some gems of content when you are promoting that sort of stuff, and when the community is actually strong.
Yeah, I don't think I could have said it better, actually. The biggest thing I want to say, if you want to see more positive content, you need to promote that positive content. You need to be someone who helps shift the Wuthering Waves narrative away from us being perceived as negative. You need to be someone who helps invite other people because they see that we have so much to offer, that the game is so amazing, that there are things there for everyone to share, that we can all enjoy how great the animations are. We can enjoy how great the characters are, how nice the kits feel, how Choyuan farms the hell out of Aura.
Exactly.
Are there any final thoughts you wanted to add, Life?
I mean, honestly, I think the game is really fun. I think it's a fun game. It is a just just on so many fronts. It's a solid game, and I think it deserves a solid and healthy community.
I agree. Where can the people find you, Life?
I mean, yeah, you can find me at Life Lessons Gaming. You can find me on YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, TikTok, Instagram. Somewhere trying to all the things basically. I'm sure it'll be in the description. Talking about story and lore for the waves that weather.
And of course, you can find me everywhere at Rhinne. I hope you guys all take a nice positive note away from this and be the change you want to see in the world.